And I'm sorry that I was not able to be here in person because I have a class right after, but I'm so grateful to be part of TCD program all in all and to be able to talk about my research one more time with the TCD group. Now, before diving into my topic, I want all of you to imagine a quiet village nestled at the edge of a dense forest in Nepal. Imagine that there is this sunset and the sound of the jungle that takes over, and there's a rustling leaves, distant howls, and you see that the leopards live in close proximity with human beings. Now, as the forest shrinks and human settlements expand, this uneasy coexistence is turning into conflict, right? So, in the recent years, this is a real story, a life story of a place called Arghakhanchi, one of the places in Nepal, Sandikharka, where there's been a lot of attacks with wildlife and livestock together, and in some cases, even humans, especially the easy prey for wildcats, which is small children are being killed at the same time. So in retaliation, villages they hunt them down. So my research talks about the fuel of how this cycle continues, about the loss and survival of people, and how big cats and their deadly effects have been impacting a lot of people in that particular region, and there's no governmental interventions that's been done. So my research talks about whether there is a diversity of prey in that region and how does human wildlife conflict in the community forest of Arghakhanchi district actually helps in talking about what are the prey diversity for leopards there and why is such kind of conflict prevailing in the particular region. Before diving into the overall research area or the research methods or anything as such, I would like to talk about the general introduction of what human wildlife conflict is. I know that I see very much similar faces in the crowd where we all come from wildlife science background, and I'm glad to see that. But for people from a different background, I just want to surfacely talk about what human wildlife conflict is. So human wildlife conflict occurs when human activities overlap with wildlife habitats. So you can see it in the slide itself, making it easier for you to also read. Um, it's an issue, especially in the global south, where human populations face environmental challenges and resource competition. So when there is human wildlife conflict or human carnivore conflict, we know that that results to a lot of strain. General strain theory and all of those theory comes together with that. One of the example could be economic losses from livestock depredation, human safety risks from carnivore attacks, and all of those, right? Like I've talked about in the story previously, the growing population of human and because of the rise of the demand of naturally fragmenting habitats, there's been a lot of wildlife population at risk. So it's been talked about one of the recent research by Karanth and Chalam, 2020, that talks about how, fragmenting or the remaining habitats have been putting some wildlife population in risk. So because of this, large carnivores are forced to live in close proximity. There's a competition for space, which we can definitely imagine. And because of that, there results to a lot of conflict. These are some of the literature reviews that I just pasted it here. Why this research is relevant. We know that we do a lot of research that usually talks about human wildlife conflict, but we do not usually see such kind of researches where the wildlife actually feeds on human beings because there's lack of prey in that region. So we thought of doing a kind of research to actually understand why, specifically in Sandikharka district, why in Arghakhanchi district, the leopards or human carnivore conflict is very much acute, and why government or any of the, like governmental bodies are not doing anything in terms of this sort of research, and to aim to fill that gap to offer, fresh insights into how these factors can inform more inclusive conservation strategies. So we want to, or I want to go beyond the scientific paperwork to actually help the community have a mitigation plan, to know if they can have a certain form of mitigation plan so they can be skipping from the different forms of conflict that's been prevailing in the each area. So the three research questions that I thought of doing was the first one, as you can see it here, what is the pre-diversity of common leopard in the study area? Second, what is the perception of local people? By looking at the surface, like looking at the literature reviews, we know that definitely the people are not going to have a positive perception of towards the leopard, but what kind of perception do they have? Do they have like a retaliation perception? Do they have like positive, negative? So all of those information was equally important for this particular research. Third would be, what are the factors that's affecting human-leopard conflict? Now, the general objective was to, like I said, to access the pre-abundance of common leopard and the factors affecting human-leopard conflict in community forest. The specific objects were, first was, like I said, to access the pre-diversity of the common leopard in the community forest. Second, to evaluate perceptions of local people. And third, to access the factors that's actually affecting human-leopard conflict. And what are the possible mitigation measures we can give back to the community by being in the community? Right. So let me guide you towards the study area. Where? And I told you that it's Sandikharka Arghakhanchi, but where exactly in Nepal? So this is a little figure. This is a map of Nepal, as you can see in the first figure, um, right here. And then on the second map, you will see like a small portion of Arghakhanchi district. So the red dots over here are the hotspot region where the conflict is acute, right? The research methods. What research method? Thought of doing purposive sampling. So I had 120 households which were surveyed. It was very difficult for me to do 120 altogether because despite of coming from Nepal, going into that village, being able to, communicate with them, having that understanding of getting their trust at the same time and being able to speak in their language was equally very challenging. That was one of the limitations as well. But fortunately, I had a team of friends who used to speak in their language despite of coming from Nepal. And then we were able to have the survey done with 120 households. We kept 7 cameras and a probabilistic survey was conducted. The primary data source and collection method had semi-structured questionnaires. We did key informant interviews with the DFO, the forest people over there, and then a focus group discussion was also done. The sampling design, a mixed research approach was done with both qualitative and quantitative research methods. 7 affected with 3,000 household of conflict, affected with 3,000 household were conducted, and the sample size was compared at a 95% confidence level and 9% margin of error by the following formula. So this was the formula, and sampling random technique was done. There were 25 victims that were selected and 95 randomly selected individuals were also there. One of the best thing about this sampling technique was that I was able to find some of the raw data, or let's say the baseline survey data already from the DFO office. Because the DFO office was nearby to the village, it was easier for me to know who were the victims in the past and how they have been getting compensation from the DFO office itself. Something that also triggered me and also confused me was the fact that despite of having DFO office nearby the village where there's so much of conflict, what was actually the DFO office doing? Or were there any other interventions or any other mitigation plans they were actually trying to help with the people or not? So that was another questions. Now, coming back to the method or moving on to the methodology part, what was done was a camera was kept there. So this is a cuddleback trail camera. I did not choose this camera because this was one of the best, but I chose this because it was more convenient for me. I was provided by this camera from WWF Nepal and DFO. So I've had like 7 cameras to put it on the tree like this. And this was kept at the hotspot of Arghakhanchi, Sandikharka for a total of 6 months. That was also challenging at the same time because you have to frequently change batteries, and there's such a lot of risks because if it's not camouflaged, sometimes whenever people walk through the road, they might just take it off as well. So we had a team of some people who was literally monitoring the cameras often so that we knew that it was in place and we were able to get or retrieve the photos at the end. The gaps between the 2 cameras were at least 2 kilometers away. As you can see it, I've written it here as well. They were installed above 30 centimeter, 3 meters from the ground wildlife trail or bush area near the village for the safety of camera, because obviously it's near the village. And like I said, there's always a risk of it not being camouflaged and people are thinking this might not be important, just throwing it away, right? So that was the method. The most important thing was to also understand why principal component analysis was important for this research, because there were so many factors. There were factors like when I go back here, there were a lot of factors, like how far it is from the water source, how far the villagers were living from from leopards main, like the proximity where they come and feed on the water, how far it was from the bush areas, how far it was from the forest, and all of those factors was very important for me to understand what is the most important, or what is the principal component that resulted to the higher conflict in that area. So principal component analysis was done for this particular research, where only independent pictures of a particular species were counted as a valid to estimate RAI. Um, Guiding you through the camera station map from the method section, this was the map. And then when you see this yellow dots over here, this was where the cameras were kept. So this was where the cameras were kept. And this is something I will like to come back later on. So after the cameras were kept for 6 months straight, we thought of getting back the results. I also have a documentary about this, which I would love to show you all, because it has all the story of how the whole thing was done in a in a filmatic way, or in a documentary way. So I would like to show that as well. But before that, I'd like to just guide you through the results. So when you see this here, the barking deer, what were leopards' prey in that area was important for us. The first question. So mongoose, 21%, wild cats, wild rabbits, 5%, porcupine, 7%, barking deer, 63%. The other result, frequency of human and leopard casualties per gender. So you see 2075 Bikram Sambat, 2474, 2073, all of these dates. But in Nepal, what happens is so there's a different calendar format. So this means it was taken in 2019, 18, 17, 16, 15, right? So from the figure itself, we know that there were a total of 19 leopards that were killed as a retaliation killing, which is very sad. And a total of 14 people were killed in this particular year. And when we talk about the casualties, 8 female leopards were also killed, and a lot of children were killed, especially children below the age of 14 years of age. And when I did the survey, I came to realize that those were the easy prey of leopard, who would feed on small children, because despite of having a lot of prey diversity, they would still feed on children. Right. Now, the distance of toilet from the forest bush. We tried to see this because we wanted to know how far the distance of toilet is from the bush, because we know that the leopards live in the bush areas or forest area. Those are their places where they walk. So how was the distance from the toilet for them? And this was, you can see it from here, it was pretty nearby, right? And the frequency of prey as well. Now, what were the seasons of incidents? The other thing that was important for us to do this holistic survey of principal component analysis was to realize what season was highly attacked by leopard in Arghakhanchi. You'll also see Nepali months over here, Baisak, Ashad, Bhadra. So which means if you go from down, Baishak means January. So we go from down January, February, March, April. So April was an acute month where the attacks by leopard were very high. So when we go from here, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and August, right? So that's how we thought of checking with the seasons where high attack by leopard was seen in Arghakhanchi region. So this is the same thing, the distance of household from community forest and the distance of public toilet from household. So the figure tells on its own that the distance of household from the bush was not that far, and the frequency of pre-occurrence. So when we see it here, the frequency of pre-occurrence, the rabbit has the highest one, and the lowest one was wild chicken. And when we did the survey with the local people, we also realized that people who were having livestock, because lot of the people there were indigenous people, and they had livestock. So it was not just humans or children that were attacked by leopard, but also livestock in a very acute range where the government interventions have done nothing about it. And we also realized that the fence system was not done properly. So all of the houses were open. It was in the middle of the jungle. The leopards and human beings were living in close proximity, and there were lack of fences to protect them. Now, the overall attitude towards leopard was more towards the negative side, and the factors affecting human-leopard conflict with the PCA analysis, when we see this, it looks a little bit confusing with the figures, so I'd like to move on to the next one. These were the factors affecting human-leopard conflict, and when we go and read this, we know that the shrub distance had the highest PCA analysis. Accordingly, the water source also had the highest one. So which means that the principal component was also water sources, where the water source was nearby to the people's household, and also where the leopard would come and feed on the water source, and meanwhile attacks the livestock and also attacks the small children. And I want to also share about linking my past research, because the research that I'm talking about right now and sharing with you all, it was a research from my graduate degree, my master's degree, and I would want to also link my past and present research by connecting the research trajectories, as talking about the social psychological aspects of human wildlife conflict using the general strain approach. When I say general strain approach, a general strain means when people have strain because of a lot of things that happen. So Agnew, his research talks about three different types of strains: objective, subjective, and vicarious strains, right? So I also wanted to look from general strain perspective, to know if they have direct or objective strain, indirect objective strain, or vicarious strain, to know what kind of strain they're experiencing, and to also talk to the experts if we can do or mitigate or help them out by going beyond the paperwork, right? So I would just not want to talk much about these because this will be my future research, but I'd just like to guide you through how I wanted to um, do this research in my future. So I just want to ask you one more question. Like, what would you do if leopards were regularly attacking livestock in your community? What are the questions that you have? I'm sure, like, as a human being, when we imagine ourselves living in a close proximity with leopards, when you have nothing to do, or you do not have help from the government, or when you do not have, that compensation from the government or proper education, what would you do if leopard were regularly attacking livestock in your community or somebody that you know? Would be a question that we all would want to think about, because we know that we definitely want to go beyond our scientific paperwork and help the community in some way or the other, right? So with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening to my research, and I would love to answer all of your questions if you have any. Thank you so much.